We good? Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Mitamu, and today we'll be talking about laufey. So I've been marinating a lot of thoughts around her music and her rise to fame, and since watching Adam Neely's video, which provided a lot of great insight, I wanted to add my own thoughts and contribute to this dialogue from the perspective of a jazz vocalist in the field. So my goal for the video is not to speak ill of laufey. I want to take a look at the history of jazz and how we can contextualize her into it. It's very multi-layered, and every point I make in this video only serves the point after and the point after that. So without further ado, let's get started. There have been a few articles painting laufey as the savior of jazz, which is wildly tone-deaf. First and foremost, we have to understand that jazz is a Black American art form. To have a non-Black person being touted as the savior of jazz just doesn't look or sound right. Okay, before any misunderstandings happen, I'm not saying that you can't play jazz if you are not Black. There are plenty of musicians from various backgrounds, including myself, that participate in jazz. However, this is a Black American music, and I think it is terribly misguided and careless for any media to frame someone like laufey to be the savior of a music that belongs and means so much to a marginalized population. Alright, let's continue. As Adam Neely pointed out in his video, most of the writers of these articles about laufey do not have an understanding of jazz, and therefore their audiences won't have an understanding of jazz. So, in not enough words, jazz to me represents dissent, non-conformity, experimentation, the expression of Black freedom. There are a lot of misconceptions and ambiguity around the genre, and I think it's because the music is always evolving, but still rooted in its traditions. Jazz is contemporary and has changed, as jazz has remained the changing same. So perhaps it has changed so much because it is constantly responding to its ever-changing social surroundings. It is constantly fighting and rejecting the white gaze of audiences and media outlets, like the ones that wrote about laufey. Jazz is not approachable, but laufey is. I heard many people tell me that they don't understand or they don't like jazz, and there's a complicated history there. There are a few reasons why many people like laufey feel like jazz is gatekept. Today, we're gonna break it down into 3 categories. Number 1, it is not accessible to younger audiences. Number 2, Bbop. Number 3, jazz is for the boys. Adam Neely does a good job explaining how laufey successfully reaches younger audiences through social media, so I won't go too much into it in this video. So let's start with Bbop. Bbop is a style of jazz that emerged in the mid-1940s, and it was defined by its complex melodic, rhythmic, and harmonic ideas. Bbop was forming in predominantly Black spaces, notably Harlem. And we had musicians like Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie pioneering the music. So when I think of jazz as unapproachable, I think of Bbop. When people say that Bbop was created with the musician in mind, not the audience, that's only kind of true. That's only part of the story, basically. So due to the swing era jazz being taken over by capitalists, musicians were starting to feel an absence of Blackness in their music. As a way to reclaim identity, jazz musicians created music that couldn't be so easily replicated or stolen. This music also demanded that the listener view the jazz musician as an artist not an entertainer. Instead of jazz musicians constantly having to rise up to whiteness, if people wanted to take part and participate in the music and community, they had to rise up to blackness. Eventually, the music started moving downtown to a more racially mixed space. And interestingly enough, the music wasn't even called bebop until it moved downtown, as noted by Max Roach. That was the media's doing.
I've rejected affection for years and years. Now I have it, and damn it.
So, how do we get from this to this? Well, they're both marketing. This image of the beret-wearing elitist hipster listening to jazz didn't emerge in a vacuum. And believe it or not, this was the image that sold jazz to white audiences. As I mentioned before, jazz is a music that is about dissent,
nonconformity,
and freedom of Black expression. The white listeners that aligned with those ideas gravitated to jazz, but watered it down to bohemianism. That was also the media's doing. Dizzy Gillespie shares his insights and how this portrayal of jazz musicians often painted them unfavorably. He states, around 1946, jive-ass stories about beboppers circulated and began popping up in the news. Generally, I felt happy for the publicity, but I found it disturbing to have modern jazz musicians and their followers characterized in a way that was often sinister and downright vicious. This image wasn't altogether the fault of the press because many followers, trying to be in, were actually doing some of the things the press accused beboppers of, and worse. I wondered whether all the weird publicity actually drew some of these way-out elements to us and did the music more harm than good. Stereotypes, which exploited whatever our weaknesses might be, emerged. Suitable things were said, but nothing about the good we were doing and our contributions to music. So you have figures like Charlie Parker, who were known in his community to be well-read, highly intelligent, an unmatched creative spirit, reduced down to his drug abuse and a state mental hospital in Camarillo by the press and its audiences. That's the image that people have of this music. And I want to remind you, that is the image that people have of blackness. You haven't been told before that you're phonies. You're here because jazz has publicity. Jazz is popular. And you like to associate yourself with this sort of thing. But it doesn't make you a connoisseur of the art because you follow it around. You've got your dark glasses and clogged up ears. You sit there in front of me and talk about your crude love affairs. You sit there in front of me and push your junkie-style glasses up on your noses. Charles Mingus. So yes, jazz is gatekept, in a way, but it's complicated. I argue its community was trying to protect it, but due to a lack and even want of understanding of the Black community, the music and its people were reduced down to caricatures created by white press and elitists. And today, that snobbery is also what's deterring people away from it. So if beatniks aren't selling, then what are? Oh, how about this girl on TikTok? So much like the beatniks, laufey is selling an image, a fantasy of jazz. Instead of the pretentious jazz aficionado, we have this romantic, nostalgic, almost Disney-esque version that is far removed from what jazz is and what it was. So to sum everything up, whitewashed marketing pushed Black jazz musicians to create a style of jazz that wasn't so easily replicated, aka bebop, but got consumed as rebellious intellectual music by the media and white folks, which also painted Black folks and jazz unfavorably. Which leads us to today, where people feel that jazz is inaccessible because of terrible press and a slew of misunderstandings. But in 2023, elitist jazz isn't the cool, young, hip thing anymore. TikTok is. Therefore, laufey is dominating the jazz charts due to similar forces that made the jazz hipsters cool. Or at least that's my hot take or whatever.
I don't know, go to a jazz jam session, like go to a jazz club or something, and, sit in. Sing Misty or whatever, or I Fall in Love Too Easily. Everybody's gonna love you, you sound beautiful.
Jazz is for the boys! Yeah. In Adam's video, he suggests to laufey to go out to a jazz jam session and be part of the culture, which I think is a beautiful thing. I think there's something to be said about interacting with other jazz musicians and creating and experiencing the culture together. But I also think that he forgot that jam sessions are not the most inviting spaces for women, at least not yet. Historically, jam sessions were designed with men in mind, and they have created a culture that is either disrespectful at best or predatory at worst towards non-straight male musicians. I have my own stories surrounding this, as well as many of my other colleagues. A woman would rarely venture into a club unaccompanied. Women instrumentalists, no matter how well known, steered clear of the jam sessions. Women who did venture into the performing arena found the range of opportunities limited. Historically, if you were a woman going to the jazz jam session, you would be seen as three things. Number one, a woman. Specifically, a groupie, a girlfriend, a wife, an accessory to someone in the band, someone that is outside of the culture. Number two, a bitch. Someone that plays the music but is taking the space of a man on the bandstand. Number three, mama, or mommy if you prefer. So a woman that has proved her worth on the bandstand. Melba Liston was a profound trombonist, arranger, composer that worked alongside Dizzy Gillespie and many others. When she first appeared on the bandstand, people called her a bitch until they realized that she was the real deal. Then she assumed the domestic role of mama. All these options are bad. Option 1, you are an accessory to the man. Option 2, you are a threat to the man. Or option 3, you can provide something to the man. Also, a side note, James Baldwin has this hot take that black men make white men feel a weird mix of admiration and insecurity regarding their masculinity. And that can come out on the bandstand. So imagine having a hyper masculine sexist culture, but also white boys? I don't know, man, I don't know. So how do you engage in a culture when it's like this? I think many of us are working towards a future where our spaces can be more inclusive, but we need more of our community to be on board with that. It's a communal effort. Our jam session spaces continue to neglect abuse. We don't always hold people accountable for their actions due to clout or what have you. And I think we can still do better because women are still very hesitant of going out to those spaces, and there's a reason why. Now, there are spaces that foster growth and learning for women and non-binary jazz musicians, such as the Next Jazz Legacy, the M3 Mentorship Program, and I imagine many, many more will come in the future. There are even bands that center on these voices, such as the Grace Fox Big Band and Artemis. In a lot of ways, I see jazz assuming its ever-changing same by responding to the sexism in our society and evolving so people like laufey can have a chance to participate.
I wish you bluebirds in the spring to give your heart a song to sing.
Wow. Right, thank you so much for reaching this far in the video. It's my first time making a video like this, but I guess I just felt really moved to talk about this. There's still a lot I want to talk about, but as always, there's never enough words. So let's address the annoying question everyone's been asking. Is laufey jazz? Personally, I dislike the "is laufey jazz" question. I don't know. I just think it gives me the ick, and I think it's an uninteresting question that often leads to uninteresting answers, or at least from what I've seen. But if I had to answer it, I would probably align with what Adam Neely said, that it's more mid-century pop than jazz. And that isn't to say that laufey cannot be jazz. I don't know, I just think that the music and the people involved have gone through so much for it to be digested in the way that it's currently being digested. Laufey, if you're watching this, please know that this music means a lot to so many people, as it probably meant a lot to you. So please continue to learn from it, grow from it, but also give back. Although it can feel really intimidating entering those jazz spaces, I found that those spaces are there for us, and you can be part of it, and you can be an access point to create more space for others. All right, that's it for now. I ran out of words. Okay.
And then a kiss, but more than this, I wish you love. And in July,